Let folks come. All right. Thank you for remembering that now. Okay. Wonderful. All right. I'm going to go ahead and get us started. Folks are going to keep joining in. My name is Kushali Narachanya, and you might be wondering who I am because you might have been expecting Ren, but Ren's not feeling well today. But again, my name is Kashali. I am the Director of Learning here at AIEDU, so I get to support all of our professional learning development and our curricular development. A brief bit about me. I used to be a high school math teacher, and I think of myself as an educator first and forever, and was then a professor and associate dean at a graduate school of education for over a decade, and have kind of continued my journey into that crux of technology and education here at AIDU. And it's really such a treat to get to be in this space with you all, and hear from you all. So I'm just super excited about that. And again, AIEDU, for those of you who are kind of engaging with one of our trainings for the first time, our mission is really just kind of devoted to ensuring like all students are ready to live, work, and thrive in a world where AI is everywhere. And we do that by working directly with teachers, with schools, with systems, and really driving at AI literacy and readiness. And so that's the work that we're doing. Today's session is all about, I think, what is kind of top of mind for so many folks, which is academic integrity and AI, and kind of what the lived experience is of teachers, educators, and students who are kind of in this age of AI tools being kind of right there with us with everything that we're doing. And we have an incredible panel of educators here that are going to kind of be driving everything that we're doing today. So I want to just dive right in because I think people are here mostly to hear from you all, not from me. So what I'd love to do is just start with intros. And so I'm going to have our panelists do the intro, and in this, they're just going to share their names, where they are in the world, because it's all around the role, and the level that you're teaching, so folks can get that context. And then just would love, as you're kind of introducing yourselves, to just talk a little bit about how student use of AI has changed your way of thinking about AI assignments, and kind of your experience with that. So we will get started. Austin, we'll come to you first for your intro.
Sounds good. I am Austin Echeverry. I'm a social studies teacher at a level 4 school for kids with social and emotional and behavioral exceptionalities. It's all students that have been asked to leave their gen ed campuses due to physical aggression in Minnesota. And I really started this journey and jumped in because the kids would be doing any assignment and they're looking at AI and they're using chat or GPT or whatever. And I was like, ooh, we need to have some guidelines and ground rules around this. But I didn't have a lot of guidance from my district and still don't. And so wanted to just really dive in and make sure that I was supporting kiddos, but also that we were working on that background of understanding AI literacy. So that's kind of where I'm at in my journey.
Awesome. Thanks for getting us started there. Connor, we'll come to you next.
Yeah, awesome. My name is Connor Mulvaney. I teach high school computer science in Polson, Montana. Polson's located right in the middle of the Flathead Reservation, and I'm in a rural setting. There's about 6,000 people in the town that I'm in. I also work part-time as an AI specialist for our district, so I'm kind of in this hybrid instructional support role as well as teaching in the classroom, which has been a really good way to kind of continue to spend some time thinking about all of this AI and what it means for education. And I would say probably like once a month, I spend some time just candidly having conversations with my students about what they know about AI, what they want to know about AI, how they're currently using AI. And those conversations are informative to see where students are at and really help me see the misconceptions that a lot of students are bringing to the table. A lot of adults as well. This is a new technology that we're all trying to figure out, but it underscores the importance of really making sure that we intentionally integrate some AI education throughout all subjects, not just in computer science. So yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Thanks so much, Connor. And we'll come to Mandy to round us out.
Hello, hello. So my name is Mandy Johnson, and I teach 10th, 11th, and 12th grade at Cambridge Virtual Academy, which is a public online school in Anaheim, California. And in my context at the online school, I teach like students who are fully online. And then we also serve about 3,000 students in our public district who take like maybe one or two online classes. And so I have kids from all over the district who are in different schools with, just sort of, from school to school, different teachers. I think in a district that's been pretty forward thinking as far as like wanting to give teachers the opportunity to learn about AI and to integrate and experiment and things like that. My personal journey, I think I'm an English teacher, and my first kind of, I was like a little bit chicken little in the beginning, with like, what does this mean for my class? What is English if a robot can do my job and write and read and all these things? But I think over the course of the year, this year especially, has been a learning journey for me as far as like wanting to find ways to equip my students with knowledge about the tools. I think a lot of what Connor says resonates with me as far as students' misconceptions. And so I kind of set out on a learning journey for myself to say, like, I don't understand these tools. I want to know more about them so that I can have conversations with my students that are going to empower them to live in a world where AI is not going to be a what if, it's going to be a what is.
Awesome. Thank you so much for those intros. And I think just like such a range of locations, students, and content areas, and really hearing like your own journeys on this for your own learning, as well as like what you're hearing from students. And so I think one of the things that, you know, I'm curious about, I think lots of people are curious about, is just like what you've been seeing as far as how students have been using AI tools creatively and positively to support work that they're doing or their own growth. And like kind of starting from, this kind of asset approach to it. And so would just love for you all to share some of the, specific things that you've seen or examples you've had of students kind of using AI tools that have kind of surprised you in their creativity or in their kind of application as we kind of continue on this conversation. So I'm going to let you. I put that question out for all the participants here. If you have questions, please like put them in the Zoom chat. Na, who's the AID learning team, she's kind of recording all of that. We'll have time at the end for questions too. So just keep them coming as they go. So, and so back to the panelists. Connor, I'll put this to you first, if you could share.
Yeah, totally. So I have actually started and now ending the year in my upper level computer science class with a big exploratory assignment where students are given essentially free rein to code whatever program they would like in whatever language that they maybe can or cannot code in. And so this falls under the term that's being thrown around of vibe coding, of essentially writing in English language what they want their programs to do. And that's just been super, super interesting to see how students choose to design programs. I can see lots of different areas in which students are super creative, and then maybe some others were like, oh, if I were to do this again, maybe we should provide some more supports around this or that. And so it's been really cool to see that. What I would say is that when I first did that at the beginning of the school year, it was accompanied with almost like 3 weeks of reflection. We made some arguments about when you should use AI, when you shouldn't. We wrote essays about it. Again, this is a computer science class, and I was like, I want you to write argumentative essays and then have some form of seminar. We did a Socratic seminar debate, and I kind of just stepped back. And those have all been really engaging for the students. I found that they've showed up and really built some creative stuff. And one part I will highlight there is that like it takes a bunch of time. That's an upper level class that I had some freedom in the curriculum, and so to dive into that much usage, and the reflection's really important. And then that's a big chunk of curriculum that gets added on to maybe a potential unit or something along those lines. So yeah, it's been a creative exploration, both for me and for the students.
That's awesome. Thanks, Connor. Mandy, we'll come to you next on that.
So thinking just about what Connor said about having the struggle with like what do you sacrifice in terms of your curriculum to incorporate or what gets shortchanged. My husband teaches physics and he and I always joke that I can pretty much do anything I want in an English class. Like we can talk about anything and make it English. And so I've found like it's nice to work with a lot of teachers who are trying things with AI because I've seen in other classes as well as in my own the way that teachers are kind of trying to help their kids like dip their toes in the pool. We have a we have an AI tool embedded in our LMS that is a closed circuit. So like it's has some privacy factors that allow our students to use it, and we can it's relatively safe. And so it has like some supportive features, but we can also embed like chatbots in assignments. And I have this year been experimenting with that. Like there's one where you can just include a single chatbot or an opposing viewpoints chatbot, and offered it as an opportunity to have students kind of like explore their thinking around an assignment or topic. We've also kind of found from talking to students, which I think we're talking to students a lot, that they are way more interested in using like a chat GPT than like our internal tool, because our internal tool is like programmed not to give answers and to like push back when they ask for answers. And so what I found is that some kids are really into it and they really engage because I get to see all the chat logs, and then other students are not really interested in having that kind of that kind of dialogue. And I think for me, like watching the ways that it's been in my own class, I think about, sorry, my bell's ringing. I think about like the ways that I engage with the tools in my own like life. I want to provide students opportunities to like also use it authentically in ways that are interesting to them. And I'm not sure this year that I've done a good job of like introducing those opportunities. Because I also have some students who are very reluctant artist students who feel very strongly about AI. And, I've had kids in my classes say nothing AI creates has a soul. And, that's like the end of their, kind of story. So I'm also kind of trying to tread the line of how do I like give kids authentic opportunities, but also like recognize their boundaries and help them kind of think about, I don't know, think through that.
Awesome. Thanks. Austin. Yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say, it's funny, Mandy, that you say that about the artist thing. So I have a student that's pretty quiet most of the time, and she just kind of tries to like be in the background of things. And one of the days that I did one of the AI lessons, we were talking about images in particular and some of the biases that happen. And she was absolutely livid for the first time in a while and was passionate about it. And she was like, AI is ruining artists everywhere, and there's nothing real about it. And so I think that's one of the things that we're always talking about too, is like, how do you authentically engage with AI and not let it take over, still challenge you and have fun with it, but also expand your thinking? And one of the things that I've noticed just in general teaching in Minnesota is there's not a lot of background knowledge to certain social studies concepts that kids have. And so we've been doing a unit in particular on the Oregon Trail, and AI has allowed me to really dig in a very different way and bring that to life for kids where they would have normally, maybe been looking at it on a book page, right? Trying to imagine what somebody looks like when they get a disease or, a stampede, and even some of those kind of things that they don't have any reference for has been hugely, hugely helpful and expanding on that. And then the other particular area has really been around mathematics, because they think that if they put in Chat GPT and the answer they get in math, it's automatically right, but they can't explain the process for it. And so we've been pushing really hard for kids to have to, even if you get the answer, that's fantastic. You still have to show how you got that answer and be able to explain it and double check that it is actually correct. So
Awesome. It's really great to hear some of the like ways in which you all are thinking about using the tools, how you're seeing students react to it. And I think just a common thread that I keep coming back to in conversations with you all and others is like this idea of adjusting and kind of experimenting with what we're having kind of students do, how we're doing it, how we're engaging with, colleagues in this work also. And so I think like the next question that would be really interesting to get to is just kind of what's your approach been a bit on rethinking the kind of work you're having students do, given the access to tools, AI tools that they have and that you have, and some of the limitations with that. And so, like, what's your approach to kind of thinking about what assignments you're giving students that really anchor in their learning, knowing that these tools are going to be accessible to them and in fact used. And so would just love to have like some thoughts on like how you've kind of evolved that and what changes you've made to kind of accommodate the world we're entering into. Um, who wants to go first? I'll let you guys
Yeah,
pick.
I can jump in on that. I would say like it is a conversation that's ongoing for sure. Like, what's the best way to make sure that we're setting up students for AI tool use in a way that's supportive for their learning. Myself and many other educators feel concerned that there may be too much of a crutch that these students are relying on with AI tool use. And I also am noticing some in the tech chat too about talking through like FERPA compliance and what tools are available. And I think that like a super great starting spot is like we don't have to use tools. We can just talk about, hey, AI can write all the code for my program. Should I learn to code? Should I just give it up? I'm done. Should I say AI can do all of it? And at least me as the teacher taking a somewhat silly, totally one end of the spectrum view on that, students are going to kind of fight back a little bit, and we have some form of ethics discussion around, what is this? What should we be focusing on? Are we really trying to hone in our computer science skills, or am I just asking you to like build me this program because that's what I want you to do? And um, I think that conversation is going to look different in different content areas, but I think the ideas remain the same. That having those conversations with students about appropriate use or risks and benefits of when we're introducing those tools is like super great spot to start.
Yeah, I love what you said about like that question to your students, like, am I trying, like, are you trying to help them develop as coders, or are you just like trying to get them to produce a bunch of code, right? And the bell. Um, I tell my students, like my writing students every year, I'm not a publishing house. Like my job is not to produce a bunch of 10th grade writing. Like that is not my job. I'm trying to help support 10th grade writers. And um, I think that, when I was at my most resistant and fearful, in my head, I thought, well, if we could just create the perfect AI tool, then we could use it in learning, right? And it would not cheat and it would support students. And as I've started to like, learn more about the tools myself and also think about like what we're really doing here, I thought, okay, then we need the perfect assignment. It's not the tool, we just got to fix the assignments. And where I've landed is, I think, where I've always been as a teacher, which is that we need to work on the kids. Like, this is a human problem or human question. I started my class at the start of the year with the question of like, how can we be ethical consumers? How can we be ethical creators? Like, what does it mean to like give credit when we use other people's work? What do we want when people use our work or read our own work? And going from that point of like, what does it mean? What are your values? What does it mean to have integrity as a writer, as a reader, as a person in community with others? Um, so I teach online. I don't know how I can't collect writing from my students on like the first day just to like see their voice. So I was really strict at the start of the year. Like, you cannot use generative AI on these assignments. I need to know how you write. Like, it's okay to sound like a 10th grader. Don't run it through Grammarly. I want to know what you can do. Um, but I've also been the kind of teacher, and I was this way even with plagiarism. Like, it's always just a conversation. Like, I'm not the teacher that gives a 0 that they can't make up. I'm not going to give a punishment that is, it's not a punitive situation for me. It's a conversation because I want the kids to do the work. So when I was finding that there were kids submitting work that was AI generated, clearly, and they would say, it's not, checkers don't work. Didn't you read in Newsweek? The checkers aren't reliable. I was like, I don't need a checker to know that you didn't write this. Like, I've been reading 10th grade writing for 15 years. Like, you didn't write this. Um, but the thing is that when I would go to students and say, like, what happened with this, I've never had a kid push back and say, like, I didn't use AI. And so I think my success has been in framing it around, like, I value the work you're doing, and I value like the process you're going through in doing that work, and like your learning, um and like how you've grown. And so I want you to have that opportunity to like redo it or revise it, or let's look at what you learned from this. And I think being like process focused has helped with that. um yeah, so I don't know.
I was looking at the comments, and Brittany, you had asked about, almost going back to paper and pencil. And I will tell you, one of the things that I've been doing with kids, which they always tell me I'm doing too much and they do not love it, but is actually having them brainstorm stuff on paper and pencil before they're allowed to have their computers, which is tricky because we're a one-to-one district and they've got their computers all the time. And they don't necessarily love writing, but I do think it's one of the things that I personally can control in helping them to understand that they still have power in learning, and that we don't want AI to do all of the thinking for us, that we can generate ideas, that we can collaborate together to expand what we were thinking, and then we can use it just as a tool like we do anything else. And so I don't know, I would say paper and pencil is not bad, and that it has a time and a place, and I do use it for that reason right there. So and then I think the other thing that I was thinking about, Mandy, when you were talking about, it's just a tool. Like, there's so many tools out there that we can use to help differentiate reading. There's so many tools that we can use to help build an image that we need for something, but all of it is just a tool and everything has a time and a place. And so I have a lot of conversations with my students about that, right? Like, I'm not gonna go to the grocery store and use a calculator to add 5 plus 3. I should be able to do some of that mathematics in my head, but I'm also not going to take a calculator to a reading class and try to use the calculator to decode a word for me, right? Like, there's a time and a place for the tools that we have, and we want to make sure that we are making sense of the tools and not just using what's in front of us, one, because that's all we know, or two, because we've gotten so reliant upon it.
Austin, I'm really glad that you brought up that conversation in the chat, because I was thinking the same things along those lines. And like, as like, if we're going to use this as a tool, then we should have times where we don't have access to that tool. In the future, it is going to be implemented to everything. It already is becoming implemented into everything. But if I'm looking at a program that me and my students have created, or a project or something, and I say, what are some ways that we could make this better? I want to have a collaborative discussion with the students. I want to put the technology away. And I think a great way to do that can be paper and pencil. Now, is this everyone's writing 5-paragraph essays with paper and pencil now? No, like, students still are learning to type, and I have graded some handwritten stuff, and I'm not an English teacher. I have no desire to grade a lot of handwritten stuff. But I think that what is good to highlight is that we as educators have implemented different learning interventions throughout our class for years, and I think that there's a lot of educators that are sliding to the paper and pencil because they find like that to be a good way to direct thinking into one small scope. And I think there are some educators that are saying, like, totally get rid of all technology. But I think time and place is really a great way to frame that. And I think the students will understand that as well when you have that discussion of like, hey, well, Like, what if we could problem solve on our own so that we don't have to be on a chatbot to do that problem solving?
Yeah, I think like when I think back to the start of the school year, like I was like a hard no AI first semester, and then as I was learning on my own, second semester I was like, okay, I can't be doing this on my own. If like I need to make it real with my students. So we're going to start talking about not so much using it, but talking about the tools and thinking about and reflecting on their use. And one of the things that was a big misconception for a lot of them was like AI is smarter than me. And we were actually using like the AI snapshots just to kind of like get their heads around like what is this? What are these tools? How do they work? And some of the things that my students were like most surprised about was like ChatGPT does not have context, like it does not like understand human emotions. Like they were very surprised by a lot of those things. And I think giving them that understanding of like, okay, then like, so then what is this tool good for? And what is it, if all you have is the hammer, like everything looks like a nail. Um, but I think like that time and place question is important. I think, and I'm excited to hear my kids like talking about it because Shali knows this, but we've been like talking about AI and human connection in my class this week. And a lot of my students, I loved it because I was hearing them call back to those conversations from earlier in the semester. We were talking about like, should you use AI to test drive like a tough conversation before you like have a hard conversation with your friends? And I unprompted had kids in the chat just saying like, no way, AI doesn't have context, like they don't understand human emotions. They're gonna hype us up and make us think we were right, and like what if we hurt our friends feelings? And so I think it's that is possible to give the kids like an understanding of the tools that is going to make them thoughtful users, which is what we want with everything. And I think a lot of the questions about like, should we go back to paper and pencil? Are we on screens too much? Should we? I mean, these are questions about education that we were asking before AI was the thing. And I think like education needs to change because the world is changing, not because of this like incursion from our future robot overlords.
That made
Yeah.
me think of if I could go back and do something different, I think I would start with that, like having them ask AI like kind of a silly question that you could get a response to where we could start having some of those critical conversations, right? Something that, AI wouldn't know about them or something, just to have it such an extreme almost situation so that they can start really critically thinking about how they can use AI, but also have to, just have some conscientious thought around it as well. So Mandy, when you were talking, it made me think of that. I'm like, I bet I could like draft up some really funny, like kind of questions as we dive into AI next year, that they could ask and see what those responses are and have some pretty in-depth conversations around it. And I think it'd be super fun to see their reactions to that.
This is so great. The conversation has been so wonderful and like really focused on like the people at the center and like the things that are uniquely human, right? How we collaborate, how we talk to each other, how we have kind of discourse, debate, and um, for the three of you, I mean, like setting up spaces in which students can do that within like the context of where you're teaching and what you're teaching. And so I'd love to just like dive even deeper into that and kind of thinking about how you are approaching having these conversations with students and families. I think like bringing families into this as well, just around like what is AI literacy, what is, AI use, what is like ethical AI use, like how are you thinking about having those conversations and like taking them with your students and with their families as well.
I think that's one of the areas where it's been extremely limited in terms of our parent communication around AI. But I'm pretty excited because I just spoke with a district level employee that does some of this work, and we're going to start a district committee next year around AI. And I think that will definitely be a part of the conversation is like, how do we have those conversations with parents? The ones with students, though, a lot of them already had some general idea of what AI was. but that's only from like Chat GPT and Canva. So it's been a very limited conversation, I think, for us because kids haven't been expanding on all of the other tools that are even available within AI. And Chat GPT is great, but it really kind of has a one lens kind of focus in some ways. So I think for us, we really have a lot of work to do in regards to both of those pieces.
Yeah, definitely the parent side needs a lot of focus as well. Um, I'd say that within the student side, like I'm the only computer science teacher at my building. I love talking about AI, and the students and the staff know that. And so that just the openness that I have within my classroom really helps generate more of that maybe candid feedback from students. One of the things that I have done is have students put their head down and say, like, and just ask some general survey questions on what their perceptions about AI are. And maybe it's like a raised hand. And sometimes I like, let's just put our heads down because I don't want you like looking at your friend and raising your hand or not raising your hand. I'm just like curious for some honest student feedback. Um, and some of the questions I've said is like, hey, what percentage of students at the high school do you think are using AI to help them with their homework at least once a week? And this is like self-report data from one class or a couple classes. And so it's not super in depth, but those help me understand at least where students are using this technology and where they're perceiving it. And having questions like that, yes, it's a teacher asking students about how AI is being used, but it is pretty open. And I think that attitude is going to allow the students to show up with a little bit more like they want to show me what AI does sometimes. And I'm like, oh, okay, very cool. Yes, I know it can do a lot of your homework. That's very nice. And or something along those lines. And like creating that type of dialogue with the students has been really helpful, and then builds a foundation of like learning all together.
Did not find my unmute button for a second. Don't let me be in charge of any technology. I think like I I work in a district that is very forward thinking and has been pretty progressive. So like last year, we did this like AI K-12. It has a long name, K-12 Deeper Learning Summit. It was like AI stuff here in Anaheim. We were like a co-sponsor of it. And so we invited parents like to come, and they were like some of the guests. I think like there's definitely, we're a lot of the schools in our district are community schools. And I think some of the outreach through the community schools is like equipping parents with like some information and knowledge about, like different AI tools and things like that. Um, I think as a teacher, like just being guided by other teachers who are working with AI tools in their classrooms, like I sent out a letter at the start of the semester. Hey, this was our AI policy last semester. Here's an update to the policy that I'm using in my class, but also want to let you know that we're going to be having conversations about AI literacy. We're going to be having some conversations about, different issues with AI tools. Here are the tools we're going to be using in the class. They're cleared through our district. They're FERPA compliant. If you have questions about them, like please call me, or here's links. So I did that like the first day of the second semester because I knew that we were going to be, incorporating. I also shared like my own values with the parents and with the students and said, listen, like, I'm going to tell you if I use AI tools when we're creating my, lesson plans and where I use it. And personally, I don't feel comfortable using it to give students feedback. So I was clear, I was clear about that. I said other teachers might, but this is, and I think that's like one of the things that is really important in these conversations with colleagues, with parents, with kids. The focus that all the teachers are talking about, like the conversation piece with the kids, having these open dialogues, having these conversations. I think these are really important. And I think that like being transparent about our own values, but also giving everyone in the room permission to like have their boundaries as we have these conversations. Is also like critically important, and like being clear with students, like you know, I did a design thinking project. This was a misstep on my part last semester where or maybe it was, it doesn't, I don't remember. It doesn't matter. It was last semester where I did say in the empathy interview part, you could use ChatGPT in this way to like interview like the main character in your book. And in hindsight, I would not have, I think I would go back and not do that because I think there's, you know, obviously kids need their parents' permission to use ChatGPT. That's like a gray area. I don't know that I would do it that way again. Like I would want to use a system where I'm like, this is the system we're using. It's clear through the district. But and I think too, because there are students whose parents probably are more in the know or don't want them using those tools, things like that. So I think like there does need to be more conversation with parents. We need to bring them in more. Um, and and I think just keep having honest conversations with our kids about their experiences.
To build on a little bit of what Mandy was talking about policies, one of the comment, this isn't something I came up with, but the stoplight approach, the common approach to classroom AI use, red light, no AI use, yellow light, some AI use, here are the restrictions, green light, freedom, but you must document when you're using AI. I found that to be a really effective and an effective strategy. And I don't like in my upper level computer science class, that's actually not, the yellow light is pretty vague. Like students define that. So when we have an assignment that's green light, hey, you can code as much as you want. We're exploring. We know we have our explorer hats on. And then if we go to an assignment where we're learning a new function call in Python, we'll have a conversation about, hey, do you want to learn this? Or do you want to just explore? Are we in learning mode or in discovery mode? And those distinctions for the students, to have them set the rules a little bit. I mean, I know kind of where I sit, but when I ask that question openly, they're like, oh yeah, we probably shouldn't use AI because we want to like be able to use this again. And then we'll have but then sometimes students are like, well, what if I used AI like this? And then I'm like, I didn't think about that use case. Maybe like you could have it name your variables for you. Okay, that works. And so they kind of set their own yellow light. Now, small class, it's an elective, it's computer science, it's a sandbox to explore. And those are some of the like things that I have going for me on my side that allow those to be really successful. But I think that that's implementable across other content areas as well.
A shout out a colleague at my school, April Monera. She's done a lot of work around she was ahead of us. I think like when I'm thinking back to trainings, like not this school year, but the year before, she was coming to our PDs and like talking about like, we got to talk about this. Like, and this is what I'm doing with my students. She's just AP Lit and reading movies. And she's been requiring design statements from students if they use AI in their work. And I got to see her talk about it like a month or two ago. And what she does that I think is really handy is if she sees a piece of student work and it's been AI's been used and there's not a design statement, she just kicks it back and says like, hey, you didn't include the design statement. So it's not even about, hey, you used AI. It's like, hey, you used AI and there's something missing here. You need to show your work. And she's using the design statement in assessment where so she says like, okay, in the assignment, if ChatGPT was involved in like creating some of the work, but then they're explaining in their design statement or they're showing that, you know, the chat logs or they're showing the prompt they used, I can assess that and see what they're understanding there in that place as well. And so I think like I like Connor's, you know, willingness to be open when the kids come and say like, well, what about this? And you're like, oh, I didn't think about that. And I think like that is something that is our challenge all the time is being open to the fact that we want to co-create learning experiences with students. We want students to take ownership of their learning. And so if we're able to see the work that's happening on the back end, when they're not just using it to avoid work or to, you know, do task avoidance, like that's a stretch for us as teachers, but I think it's a good one.
Great. I think the the conversation, like the conversations about how are we like bringing everybody in to the conversation is one that really resonates, and I think I heard from everybody. And like the willingness to be there, there's a lot of learning happening, and it's learning with students, and kind of having them be a part of that process. And Connor, I think like having students defining, what is this yellow zone, building that autonomy, which is going to be an incredibly important skill of like, how do you kind of set your own boundaries and kind of work with that, and kind of push your own learning, and identifying where that learning is. And then Mandy, you're talking about like, what value are students seeing in the work that they're doing and their thinking, right? It's not just about the product, it's about the process, and how do we keep kind of coming back to that and supporting the process, more and more as well, which has been, just really great to hear from all of you. So um, those were like the big sets of questions that we had. So we're going to turn it over to all the participants and kind of questions that you all have. There is one from like way back at the beginning of the chat that I think I can get us started with. And this is this is specific to Connor. So I'm just going to prime you for that, Connor. And for other folks on the call, like please put questions that you have in the chat so we can get those to the panel as well. This came from Charles, and it was just how have students adapted their learnings to the set curriculum at the same time grasp CS skills necessary for the future of work?
Yeah, that I think that's a continual question of like, what are the necessary computer science skills that students need to learn? Like, if we look at the workforce, there's a lot of software developers using some form of AI tools, and so exposing students to exploring with these tools is potentially a skill that they need to develop in order to be prepared for the workforce. If you look at some other data from like the World Economic Forum's 2025 job report that was published in January, like a lot of the data suggests that not only is it like software developers using AI for that, but many employers in the next 5 years are going to spend a lot of time and resources upskilling and hiring people that know how to work alongside AI. And so some of that data really like for me shows the importance of making sure that we intentionally provide some form of opportunity to discuss, reflect, and then explore where applicable. I in my classroom, I have the 3 C's of computer science, which are very intentionally communication, collaboration, and then coding, because at the end of the day, the students who are the best programmers in my class that can work on a project together are the ones that can clearly articulate the challenges they're encountering and what they've tried to do to solve that problem. And those are like really good skills to practice and over, that even if you're not practicing the coding syntax, will make you a better programmer.
There's a version of that, like Mandy and Austin, for you. Like I think like there's within CS, there's like a bigger debate around like what are the coding skills necessary, but when you think about what are the writing skills necessary, reading skills necessary, and like what's outlined currently in standards, and what we're seeing the need to be, just like any thoughts on that kind of more broadly on the other content areas as well.
Yeah, I mean, I heard Sam Altman say in an interview with Adam Grant like a month or two ago that in like 10 years, people won't write anymore. Like, no, everyone will use ChatGPT for writing. And I was like, like, what is my class if that's true? Like, what are we doing? Right. Like, I teach English. I feel like in a lot of ways, I feel like in an English class, like a big part of it is just learning how to human. And so, like, how do we keep teaching that? But also, but also feel really strongly that like, I'm of like, if you're an English teacher, this will make sense, but I'm of like the Kelly Gallagher school that like the 5-paragraph essay is kind of like gone the way of the dodo. Like we don't really need it anymore. It's not really a valuable like writing. No one writes like that in the real world. So kind of trying to like disrupt what teaching writing looks like. And like he always jokes that like you have to play a lot of bad piano to get good at the piano, and that's the same with writing. So I mean, like I want it to be something kids want to do. At the same time, like, you know, people reading was falling off like before AI. So like that's a fight we've been fighting already. Um, and then I think about like our standards. You know, we were talking in this conversation last week at an AI training where it was like, you know, if ChatGPT can write a summary, like, is it that important to teach kids how to write a summary? And somebody was like, well, it's in the standards. And I'm like, later talking to my husband, I was like, well, the standards were written by humans and standards change. Like, you know, like the standards might change. So I'm not sure. I think literacy is an equity issue. Like people, all people should have the opportunity to learn to read and write and like express themselves. And so I don't want to lose that. I want that to continue to be important. So, but that's like a feelings thing. That's not sure you can turn that into policy.
But Mandy, I think about that a lot, like within fluency, right? I don't know how many people have had the conversation alone this week with me that like fluency is speed. And it's the constant argument that no, fluency is expression and emotion. And I think that's where some of the AI tools are fantastic in that you can get some really rich content and you can get literacy from authors that, you know, maybe a kid wouldn't necessarily have access to, but you don't always have somebody that's reading it with the expression, bringing the story to life. And that's what reading is. I mean, I could sit and read a calculus book all day long, but it's not about that, right? It's hearing the characters and it's bringing those stories off the pages so that I can put myself in that moment. And AI maybe eventually will be able to do some of that stuff, but right now, the tools that at least we have access to are not doing that. And so it wouldn't matter even if somebody could create a story because they're still going to be missing pieces. But I agree with you also on the equity thing. And when we have kids with such explicit skill gaps in reading, AI can do some really solid differentiation to help support teachers in particular and then students to be able to bridge those skill gaps instead of creating skill gap upon skill gap upon skill gap. Like I can allow a student who needs to learn long vowels to have access to that in a very systematic and explicit way to build that skill so that then they can read all of this other stuff. But if they can't even do that, then we are taking away their power of thinking because they're just listening to whatever noise is coming at them.
Yeah, and it just keeps coming back to like these, you know, I mean, Connor, when you're saying the three C's of coding, right? Like having these very human skills be at the top of it, right? And similarly with other content areas, thinking about like what are those kind of longer lasting, more durable skills that are getting built as the content instruction is happening as well, right? I think we probably have time for one, maybe two more questions. And so we have one from Jane, which is just like if you've worked with students to show how AI can be used in fields that are not traditionally taught in high school courses, or I guess across courses, just wondering if that's something that you all have had any experience with or could speak to.
I mean, I'm at middle school and I teach a career class and I teach a class called Mindsetology, which I've created. So I think, you know, to some extent, yes, but the power really comes back to, for me, we're not in a classroom today for the sake of being in a classroom. We're in a classroom to learn and build on the skills that are going to take us into tomorrow and beyond. And so I try to, any of the content that I teach, I try to do it from a perspective of like, today we're sitting in these four walls, but like learning is bigger than that and more than that. And so we have to think bigger than that and more than that.
Yeah, it's just the situation. I mean, that's learning isn't to produce one thing in the school, but like what are you going to apply? How are you going to apply this out as well? Um, That's great. And then I think there was another one from Colette, which was how are you addressing academic integrity violations about AI or teaching students when to use it beyond just a spotlight or beyond a stoplight, not spotlight. talk about inverting letters there.
Yeah, I think that so in my context, coding, if they write a program, they can't tell me what the code does, then we have a conversation there and talk about the usage of that tool. But I think that I would highlight one a writing ELA writing teacher in my building who I've had numerous conversations about AI. She does some great intro to AI and experimented with tool use with students. And when applicable, her policy in her classroom is, if I suspect that this is AI, then you're just going to come in and write it in person with me. We're not going to argue about it. We're not going to have a discussion. We're just going to say, oh, I know, like she says, I know you're writing. We've been some of these students for multiple years. And so she suspects it of being AI, then we're going to redo it. And I highlight that not because I think it's a real clear practical example of like a teacher policy. We can have a lot of conversations about like what's ideal, but what's like actually achievable for many teachers. I think, hey, this is a gut feeling. I'm not totally sure. Let's not have an argument about it. Let's just try it again. That's not super punitive, a huge punishment. It's a opportunity to just move forward. Yeah, the student has to do a little bit more writing. But I think that is a really clear example of something that's simple and sustainable, because as much as I would like to have these like really clearly perfect solutions, we don't have the time to develop those. And so that seems like a really great, easy one.
Great. We are coming up upon time. I am putting into the chat right now a survey for feedback on our time together. We do have all these other questions and whatnot, so we will kind of be sending out resources after this panel is done. As you all are taking the survey, I just want to extend a huge thank you to the panel. And I think if you can like what's a one sentence like takeaway that you might have? It might be more than one, but just like what's the action coming out of this as we kind of continue to think about academic integrity and AI use in education moving forward, that we can kind of leave all of our participants with here.
I think I would just say, like, it's a tool. It's one tool in a basket of tools that you have access to. And so really, my goal in this upcoming year is just to find the right tool at the right time, but give kids access to lots of different tools that's going to help them expand on their thinking.
Yeah, I think building on that, I would say just be open to having honest and curious conversations with students. Like, I think that will highlight for you student misconceptions. It has a talking point where, for me, students have shared with me, oh, I know AI is bad at math. And then another student in the same class says, AI helps me with my math homework. And so there's a great opportunity for us to dig into discussing appropriate tool and topics like that. So just be open to exploring with your students. And that doesn't necessarily mean diving into working with chatbots. It just means having conversations.
Yeah, I think I was paralyzed with all that I didn't know at the start. And I think just like remembering, like always, like my best work as a teacher was never when I knew everything, but it's just when I like remembered that like we learn in community and like we don't go alone. And, as a teacher, I can lead the way and we can learn together. And I think being comfortable in that space as a teacher is good for students.
Amazing. Mandy, Connor, Austin, thank you so much for kind of bringing your voices to this space, sharing kind of your experiences and truly your honesty and like reflection. I think there's a lot of humility. There was a lot of, I tried this and it didn't work. And I think that's just an example of how we're learning together in this space. And we're at kind of a the edge of what's happening in schools as well. So thank you to everybody who was able to join. Be on the lookout for communications from our team for the resources from the material. And just want to say thank you again. And please do complete the survey so that we can continue to improve the offerings we have for you all. Have a really lovely evening or afternoon, depending on what time zone you're in.